Hey, Slay Nation, it's your host, Heather, back with another episode of the So She Slays podcast. I know all of us who are listening have been here before. We have been in the spot where things aren't working out like they should, something happens, or you're just really going through it, but you're going through it in silence. I know I've seen a couple things come across my feed where it's like, no one knew I was going through it. And in the background, there's someone partying and laughing and having a good time and all that kind of stuff. But it's like nobody knew I was going through it. This is what we're going to be talking about today, and especially with the guest that we have, Ashley McGirt-Adair. She is a psychotherapist, TEDx speaker, founder of the Therapy Fund Foundation, and an author. So we're going to be talking about her book today, but we're going to mostly be pivoting and talking about what it's like to heal in silence and what exactly the heck that means. Because it sounds all illustrious and like a little mysterious there, but I guarantee you do it because I do it. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about her book. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You've been busy. You've had a day. We had a nice little discussion
offline. Whole day, but I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'm excited to be here with you as well. I'm excited to kind of talk about this thing that I think, I'm going to be honest with you, I think most, if not all, women go through this. We just don't realize that that's what we're doing.
So many of us, we heal in silence in the dark crevice of these corners, and we think we're powering through and that we're doing good to ourselves and to others by not speaking out loud and speaking truth to what we're actually going through, but it actually does more harm than good. And I've been that person. That's why I wrote the book on it, so that we can heal out loud and stop trying to heal in silence.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit before we even get started, because I think that's such a great pivot too, where it's like we're healing in silence, but we should really be healing out loud, right? Yes. So let's talk about both of these sectors.
So essentially what I see, especially with women, especially high achieving women, so many of us, we want to deal with our problems later. We don't have time. We don't have time to be sick. We have to go to work. We have to take care of our children, do all of the things, build businesses, corporations. Many of us are founders and leaders and all of the things that we're doing, and we have to be the strong one. So we don't have time to cry, fall short, be vulnerable. And many of us, we're smiling while we're struggling. I was that person. And it was really interesting because just recently I came in contact with one of my old classmates from elementary school. I actually write this story in the book. He had reached out to me and he was sharing how I always seemed like just a happy kid. And I was like, really? I was so depressed and miserable during that time in my life. And he sent me a ton of pictures of us when we were younger. And there was a picture of me and I was smiling so hard, obnoxiously hard. And I was just like, I was trying to, put on that persona of perfection and happiness, what I thought I needed to do at 9 years old. And he's like, I would have never known. Of course you wouldn't have. But if you've seen the picture of me and all the other children next to me, I was the only one like,
extra,
extra, trying to hide what I was really going through. And then that trickles on into adulthood and how we navigate this world, because we learn at very young ages, not to be sad, especially women of color, especially Black women, what we carry when it comes to showing our emotions, our sadness, and even tracing it back to American chattel slavery, when the slave master didn't want to see a sad slave, it would be beat for crying. And then that's been passed down generation upon generation. And we just have to be the strong one. And so healing in silence, it really often looks like strength, but it's not. And these are things that I see so much within our community, with women, with everybody really. And I'm happy that we're now coming of age where more people are talking about mental health and being vulnerable and sharing the things that we're going through, but still so many of us are healing in silence or not healing at all.
Yeah. And I can relate to that so much myself. Like being in a family very male dominated, but our women are strong. Like the women are strong, right? And God bless for being able to, because Lord knows we'd be walked all over if we weren't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also too in dealing with the world. But I think you definitely hit on something when you were just like, we are trying to deal with this in silence.
Mm-hmm.
Trying being the key word, meaning like it's not freaking working. And there's so many women that pop up in my mind that I'm just like, I know you're struggling. There is no freaking way you're not. And it's just they just bite their tongue and they keep going, or they become so numb that it's not even a thing, or it's like a pick your battle situation, right?
Yeah, we don't want to be a burden. And it's like we're going through things, or we may be seeing other people who are also going through things. So it's like, I don't want to share what I'm going through. I don't want to be a burden and put this. And then it kind of becomes like a struggle comparison or a struggle war where everybody's going through something. So I'm just going to sit back and not talk about what I'm going through because I know the world is a shit show right now, to be honest, and all the things that are going on. So I'm just going to back away and try and fall into this strong woman archetype that really isn't a reality. And I always say there's so much strength in vulnerability. There's so much strength in your sadness. If you're sad in that moment, it's okay to acknowledge that so that you don't have to be sad all the time. But when you hide it, that stores itself within the body and muscle memory and all of
Mm,
these things that impact how we show up.
yeah. Well, and another thing too, to kind of speak to that, like and this is, look, I am by no means perfect at doing this. We are still actively trying to share the emotions and share what we're going through, and express vulnerability, especially in a world that doesn't really let you do it to anybody, right?
Right.
Like it's the world, I feel like, sees vulnerability as a weakness. And I have always started to challenge that and state that vulnerability is the one thing everybody seems to be running away from. So if everybody's running away from it, that means they're scared of it, right? So being vulnerable is actually being strong, being brave.
Exactly. And we have to really understand the root of their sadness and the fear in their vulnerability because for so long, women have been shamed, been guilted for when they did speak up. Think about all the times when somebody said, "Hey, I'm going through something," and then, you're ostracized from your community. Or if you say, "I'm dealing with a mental health struggle," or "I've been diagnosed with this mental illness," then your community weaponizes that against you. And it becomes, did you go to therapy today? Did you take your medication today? So we have to really be mindful of how we communicate to one another when they are vulnerable, when they do share the things that we're experiencing, because that's what perpetuates this circle where no one wants to share, no one wants to be open. And even if it hasn't been done to them, I see how you talk about people like maybe Kanye West or celebrities, people we don't know, when you're posting all these things about people. If I'm experiencing something similar to them, do you think I want to talk to you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that come into our minds and our filters when we're just like, are you safe enough to say something to? Like, are you safe enough of a person for me to actually express this to? Like, and I feel like that's a bigger thing in itself.
Yeah, I actually wrote a chapter in my book about this young woman named Janelle, and it's talks about being safe enough to speak. So her aunt actually reached out to me when she had learned that I was writing about racial trauma in healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked her, what led to her being open to talk to me and share these stories with me, and how did she get to a point to where she could talk and share her experiences of losing her niece who actually died as a result of systemic racism and oppression, and the way that she was treated in this healthcare system, turned away instead of actually being received with adequate good care. And we talked about what safe spaces look like, and we know when a space is safe or not. And I think sometimes people will be like, this is a safe space, it's a safe space. If you have to keep saying it's safe,
It's
it's
not
probably
safe.
not that. We should know. We should know.
I want to talk about this more because in my own mental health healing journey, in my own, in going to therapy, my own experiences and that kind of stuff, you talk about racial trauma. You also talk about finding someone who's like culturally able to relate. And I
Yes.
cannot express the importance of all of that. Like, especially in, like, I mean, I'm sure you can speak to yourself and what you've seen with your clients, but for me, in my own experience, it was so crucial to me that I found someone who is first generation Asian American, who can identify with, addictions and traumas and being around certain, that type of family archetypes, and what goes into culturally being first generation but having, immigrant parents and this, that, or whatever. So I'm like, there is so much that makes you who you are as a person, that is beautiful and individualized, but it's those things too that you kind of need to find in somebody else in order to get effective, I think, help.
Absolutely, 1,000%. And that is why I do this work. I actually wanted to be a lawyer, and I was raised by my grandmother, being birthed in a public health crisis that was not labeled as such back then. And I was in a predominantly white neighborhood at the time. And I remember seeing the school counselor who did not understand the role of Black grandmothers and the
Mhm.
family system. So I found myself at 9 years old having to educate her on race relations in America. And it didn't just stop there. Later into my adulthood, one of the first Black clinicians that I seen, she did not understand racism. She didn't believe in it. So even if
Ooh,
you are a person of color, you can still uphold white supremacist ideology. And so you really have to go deeper than the credentials and make sure that they really understand your lived experiences. And so it's so, so important. And they don't teach these things in school. I went to some of the best universities out there, and there's maybe one cultural competency course, which is a myth. You cannot fully be culturally competent in anyone's race. I'm learning every single day what it means to be a Black woman, and that constantly is changing.
yeah.
So you can't fully be competent. And that's why I teach people to be culturally responsive and really embrace cultural humility and what that looks like. And for a long time, I did hospice therapy. And so I was sitting with people during the end of their life from all different walks of life, different walks of faith. And I would do research on my own to understand certain things that were important to them at the end of their life, even if it wasn't my belief system, just that I could better support them. And so that's part of being culturally responsive, so that you can walk with your clients and really understand them and ensure that certain practices and things that are important to them are available.
Yeah. And speaking of your clients and your practice and all this kind of stuff, I mean, I wonder, because I'm thinking about the audience members that could be relating to this, right? And I'm thinking about maybe the ones who don't realize that they're suffering in silence, and what it is that they should be asking themselves to see if they are.
How does your body feel? Sometimes, we become so desensitized to a thing and just how we've been navigating this world. It's the way we've always done it, but our bodies will tell us. Have you been feeling migraines, headaches, tense in your shoulders, stomach aches, all of these things, just maybe more irritable? So tune into your body. Are you walking around in a heightened state, extra tight? Do you feel like you need to loosen your shoulders up? All of those things. So really just pay attention to your body, and then also ask yourself what all is on your plate. How would life look differently if you took some things off of your plate? Even if it's as simple as, since we're talking about plates here, investing in paper plates for a season. There's a time where I don't feel like doing the dishes all the time. So guess what? We're going to do a paper plate season.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually getting ready to get braids. My hair is pressed right now, but I'm going on my book tour, and I don't want to have to wake up and do my hair every day. Woes of a Black woman. So I'm going to put some braids in. So that's one less thing that I have to do every day. And so think about that, whether it's investing in paper plates, calling on a friend, a partner, or, doing low maintenance hairstyles. If it's something, a ponytail, braids,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that will just make your day easier, especially if you're coming upon a busy season.
Yeah, gosh, I always think of the moms out there and, how I especially definitely think of my sister, and how the heck she's able to like do it. Oop, hold on 2 seconds.
Hotline.
I was like, oh, I thought I definitely put that on silent. Um, Anywho, but what I would say is like, I definitely always think of the moms and my sister, and how the heck they do things, like how they were able to do things. Because honestly, I'm looking at the people I know and I'm like, I it's just me, myself, and I.
Mm.
And I'm running around like a crazy person doing all the freaking things. And I don't know how I would even add children into this mix.
Mm.
I don't, like, my own mother growing up too. I mean, full-time job, had 3 children, went to school full time, like all of this. I'm like, how? And it wasn't, it was just getting a graduate degree. I was like, what are you made of? Like, what are we doing?
It's a lot. It can be a lot. So many people ask me. I have 2 bonus boys. My husband had 2 boys from a prior marriage, and people are always asking, when are we going to have our own children? And I'm like, my life is not set up for children. Already managing the bonus boys is a lot. Just taking them to school, transporting. I'm so glad the eldest can now drive, but it's a lot. And so I look at the mothers and I'm like, how they're managing, especially business owners, and my own mom, my grandmother, who had 7 children and managed
Jeez.
mostly by herself. And I'm just like, whew, it's a lot. But I also know enough about myself and what I want to take on. And just, I'm always gallivanting somewhere around the world. And I know women do that with children, but I'm also like, okay, the way I live my life, I
I
don't
don't want
think
to.
I could that on. And not everybody is accepting of that conversation. And when I say it or share that I don't want to have children, I'm like, I'm happy with my bonus children. And when I was dating, I dated men with children because I knew they weren't pressed to have a baby for me.
Smart.
And that was
Smart.
a choice that I made. And I'm like, why do you have to keep pushing these ideals on women, and not all women want those things? I've birthed so many babies in other ways, and I'm so protective of my babies that I don't want them to come into the world that we are living in today.
Understandable. Definitely understandable. And I think too, when we speak of your book, when we speak of the trauma, when we speak of healing in silence, women and mothers are always the first thing that pop into my head, obviously.
I started out my chapter talking about my relationship with my mother,
Mm.
and which is such a pivotal part in my own healing journey and how I navigate this world, and just looking at the relationship of others and their mothers as well.
Mm. Mm. Talk to me a little bit about the book, what you're covering, the chapters, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the book addresses racial trauma in healthcare, and it's the call for culturally responsive care. So it's really a guide to those who are in the medical field, but it's for everybody. And I provide prompts, reflections, tools for both clinicians, medical professionals, and laypersons who are just experiencing this thing called life. And it's really a toolkit so that providers can check their biases, understand the systemic harm that has been done within the healthcare system so that we can do better. You have to know your history in order to make changes. And so I talk about the historical medical apartheid that has happened, crediting Harriet Washington, who actually wrote the book Medical Apartheid, but some of the atrocities that have been experienced on Black and Brown bodies. I talk about things like ICWA, and how Native children were removed from their homes, as well as Black children, and what that looks like at disproportionate rates in comparison to our white counterparts. There's a story that I tell of a very young girl, one of my very first clients that I was working with. And I went into the home. She was living with a white family, and there were 1,000 dolls everywhere. White porcelain perfection dolls, and this was a little Black girl, and there was not one doll that looked anything like her. And so when I think about that I think about the doll studies by Kenneth and Mamie Clark,
Mm.
where they showed children of all races, a black doll and a white doll, and they asked who's smarter, who's prettier. 98% of them all chose the white doll. And that often has to do with how we have been socialized and conditioned to see who's better, who's prettier. And then when the black children or Asian children were asked to point to the doll that looked most like them, they started to cry because they realized they just put all these positive attributes to the white doll, and that's not the doll that looks like them and reflects back on.
Mm.
And so I had this child that I was working with and living in this home, and I was advocating for her. And I'm like, we need to get some representation in here for her.
Yeah.
They dismissed me. They were just like, it's a great home. It's a great family. It's wonderful. And I'm like, I would not do well living in a home looking at these dolls staring back at me that look nothing like me. And then what does that say about me as I start to form my own self-esteem? And so it was a huge, huge battle, but that is why I wrote the book, and I share some of those stories within the book so that we can learn from them and so that we can do better.
I wonder too, and that actually really reminded me of something that you just talked about here. I've always said, I mean, so she slays in general, we've always just been like representation matters. Cross-border representation matters. Being able to see someone who is like you or who looks like you and what in a position or doing a thing that you aspire or want to do or am currently doing, like there's so much power in that. And what I reference a lot of times to speak to what your story you just talked about was like, a lot of times parents are like people, they don't realize how big of a deal it actually is, right? Especially if maybe you're not the minority in the situation. You're just like, it's a doll, who cares, right? Then it means a lot more than that, because what I will say is, I grew up in a predominantly white area. I grew up with people who did not look like me at all, unless they were like my family members. I was definitely the token Asian kid. So I think it was one of those situations where I have a distinct memory to this day. I am 36 years old to this day. I remember being in like the second or the third grade, being told I couldn't do things because I'm a girl, because I'm like, this sweet little innocent, blah, 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 blah. So the list can go on, right? And I remember, and I still have this, it's a book. And we all know the Disney story Mulan, but this is like the Mulan book that is like the legend, what the Disney's like based off of.
Okay.
So I got a book, and my mother got it for me, because during the time I was like, I hate the way I look. Why do I not look like everybody else? Like, and it was that mindset, right? And I can't do it because they said I couldn't, or I'm a girl, or I'm Asian, or I'm Chinese, or whatever it may be, right? So she gave me this book, and in the inscription, I don't know it for verbatim, but like, it's like she wrote in it, it's like, so that you can do anything.
Go, Mom.
Right?
Go,
I was
Mom.
like, but that, I will tell you, seems so small.
That is huge.
That is a moment that I still have that book. I will never get rid of that book. But that moment, that book changed the trajectory of my entire life and how I've seen myself.
I love that. I love that. That's so beautiful. And that's my movie. Let's get down to business.
So that's what I've like, gosh, it's like people may think that it's so small. Like, it's not just a doll.
No, it matters. It matters so much. And I shared I wanted to be a lawyer. That was because I grew up watching the OJ trial and seeing Johnny Cochran on TV. I had never saw a black man, in the granted, he was representing another black man on trial for murder, but just watching him, I was like, I want to do that. I want to do exactly what he's doing. And then through my own struggles with my grief that turned into depression and suicidal ideation, I started to want to understand psychology in the brain and help myself heal, because I'm like, the therapy that I was getting was not therapy. It was me educating the clinician on race relations. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. But I just remember watching Johnny Cochran and being so enthralled, or growing up, anytime I saw a dark-skinned person on television, Tatiana Ali, Ananda Lewis, I was like, I want to be a talk show host like Ananda Lewis. So all of these people, and there were so few. There was already few Black people on television, but they were mostly lighter skinned. So when I saw the darker skinned characters, I really flocked to them. I'm like, they look like me. Their skin looks like me. And my brother, he's half white. And my sister, she's very, very light skinned. She's your complexion. And so I was the darkest one in the family. And I really stood out. And so anytime I saw representation of darker skinned individuals, I would aspire to do the things that they were doing.
I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing. And so it's like, I always tell people, I'm like, it's so much more than what you would ever think it is. And it's a lot of like those little things that add up, right? To help you build that narrative of, you know, who you are, what you do, and how things affect you. I would love to kind of address the fact of like dealing with mental health and finding the right people to help you do that. Because I feel like I have had discussions with many people, many friends who are like, I want to do this. Like, I'm ready, but it's like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to find somebody who is going to be able to speak my language per se.
And I always say finding a therapist is like dating. It sometimes takes some time. You know, you got to find a good fit, and that relationship is so key. So be sure to take advantage of the consultation. Almost every therapist does a free consultation, 15 minutes. So ask questions. What is it that you're even seeking a therapist for? Are you wanting, you know, couples counseling? Are you dealing with stressors of a new job? Anything like that. So whatever it is that you're seeking a therapist for, make sure that clinician is skilled in that. I am not a couples therapist. So if you reach out to me and you want to do relationship counseling, I'm not the therapist for you. And I'll refer out. There are some therapists who know good and well that is not their skill set, and they're going to try and work with you. So it's really important that you ask sound questions. Have they worked with this before? What's their experience? What's their degrees? And as far as like a starting point, you can start off with a directory. There's Psychology Today. There's also specific ones that are based on race, like Therapy for Black Girls. There's Clinicians of Color, Latinx Therapy. I love them. Beam is also a great source. So there's a multitude of directories that will have different options for you to put down. What are you experiencing? Anxiety? Do you want a woman? Do you want a religious therapist, Christian, Muslim, whatever the case may be? Someone who's atheist? Do you want an LGBTQ clinician? So you can put in these specifiers in a lot of these directories and start there, and then start asking questions, try a few sessions out, see how things are going, and speak up, advocate for yourself. If the clinician is assigning you a bunch of homework and that's not working for you, you don't have the time. It's like, be real. Listen, I'm not going to be able to do those journals. Is there anything else that we can do? What can we pivot? Let them know what your learning style is. A good therapist, honestly, should be asking these questions. I know if my clients don't like to read, I'm not going to share a book with them. Maybe I'll share an audio book or a movie or music. We actually make playlists, and I do art therapy as well, and a lot of somatic body work. So just, you got to find a good fit. A lot of people come to me, they're like, oh, you know, EMDR is a hot topic right now. I do EMDR. And so they want to do EMDR, but then they actually want to do more talk therapy. With EMDR, there's not a lot of back and forth. There's not a lot of dialogue. And people realize they want more of the dialogue. They don't want to do the eye desensitization memory thing. They want to actually talk through what they've experienced. And so sometimes we hear things, we see things, and we think we want it, and then we experience it, and it's like, nah, maybe not today. And I'm with brain spotting. Brain spotting's amazing, but for me, I don't want to talk about the colors that I'm seeing and what I'm feeling as you're moving this duck around in front of me. And for some people, that's very, very helpful. But I know for me in my own therapy, I don't like that. And it's important to, just advocate, say what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and know that it is okay for you to speak up and share with your therapist. I don't really like that. Can we try something else?
Yeah. I think also too, it's like remembering that they're there to like help you. And so it's like if you don't feel like you're being helped, or things are missed, or it's not doing what it is that you're looking for, is to advocate and like actually say something. Because
Yeah.
again, nobody can read your mind when it comes to stuff like that. You got to be able to say something. I also want to address, and I know some things have happened to where, therapy may be a little bit more affordable, but you also have
Mhm.
a foundation too. So it's
Yeah.
like, for those who are just like, I can't actually do this. I want
Mhm.
to and I'm ready to, but like money wise, I can't.
That is one of the biggest barriers. It's like, okay, you go through all of the rigmarole to actually find a clinician, and then maybe they do or don't take your insurance. You can't afford the copay, or you can't afford the private pay, which is why I created the Therapy Fund Foundation, to eliminate barriers to healing for historically excluded communities, because we haven't had access to sound, culturally responsive mental health services. And when we did, well, it wasn't sound or culturally responsive, but we were misdiagnosed, overdiagnosed, all of the things that happens within our community. And then as a clinician myself, I did this work to be able to serve my community. And it's a business. I also have to be able to pay my bills. And so with the foundation, we're paying clinicians a market level rate. We're not undercutting them. It's a super easy process. Insurance can be a lot of difficult paperwork, especially if you're a solo practitioner without a medical biller. And then maybe you do have all those things and the insurance denies your claim.
Mm,
And it's just a lot. And especially when you're working with people who are experiencing issues like racial trauma, which isn't in the DSM. So there's actually not a diagnosis for it. And in order to be reimbursed by
odd.
insurance, you got to have a diagnosis. I mean, I can give you an adjustment disorder, but for how long? How long are
Yeah.
you? So there's these things, and that's also why there's been so much misdiagnosis and overdiagnosis, because people needed to be able to be paid. So they said what they said so that they were reimbursed by insurance, and then also biases and other things that come into play. How maybe Black men will be overdiagnosed with schizophrenia and they have the same exact signs and symptoms as a white man who's presenting with bipolar, and then they get the
Mhm.
bipolar disorder diagnosis, and the Black man gets the scary schizophrenia diagnosis. But yeah, that it's so key and critical.
Yeah. How can people like find out more information about like the foundation, about how, because that's the thing that sucks, is like it does cost money and not everybody's insurance really like comes through, and chances are, like you said, you spend all the time doing all the things, finding someone that you really love, and then you're like, my insurance doesn't cover it.
Yeah. So we are a 501c3, a nonprofit, and we're based in Washington, and we have a pilot program in California. So if you are anywhere across the nation, right now we're doing fundraising and planning so that we can serve the entire US, but right now it's just Washington and California. And you would go to our website, therapyfundfoundation.org. We do have a directory of culturally responsive clinicians. So even if you're not in Washington or California, you can still check out our directory and our resources. We have an annual Reclaiming Wellness conference. It's the only BIPOC mental health conference on the entire West Coast,
Wow.
which is dedicated specifically toward improving mental health outcomes for communities of color, and it's led and by Black and Brown clinicians. So as a therapist, I have to get a certain amount of continuing education credits to maintain my license, and most of the workshops are taught by Eurocentric and from a Eurocentric lens. And so that's why we created this conference. We do a lot of virtual events, several things. So even if you're not in Washington or California, still engage, connect with us. You can follow us on social media at Therapy Fund Foundation on most platforms, but those are the ways in which you can access. And if you are local and you need access to a therapist, first check out the directory, find a clinician, and then you apply for a voucher, and we pay for your therapy sessions.
Oh, love. Okay, we have reached the point in our interview where we're getting down to some rapid fire questions here.
Fire.
So, first off, What is one thing women should stop apologizing for immediately
Everything.
across the board?
We don't need to apologize for anything. As women, we always say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The slightest thing that we don't need to apologize for, especially, when we're sad, or I'm so sorry. We don't have to apologize for our sadness. We don't have to apologize for how we show up. It's important for us to show up in every space unapologetic.
Okay. Therapy myth you are so tired of hearing.
That therapy is not real. You're just talking. I'm so tired of hearing that. People tell to me on the plane when they ask what I do. I try to not even say that I'm a therapist, but I'm not a natural liar, so it just comes out. And so many people tell me it's a myth, it's not real, and I'm just tired of hearing that.
And you're like, and clearly
And
you've never gone.
there's a scientific study behind it. Come on, there's evidence-based practices. Come on.
Oh my goodness. Okay. The emotional era you're currently in one word.
Whew. Emotional era. Like, how do I say an emotional era? I will say excitement.
Okay.
With my launch and everything. I'm excited. I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm excited about where we're going. There's so many things happening, negative but also positive, and I'm excited for my family. Our eldest is off at college, and my niece, my firstborn, my baby who looks just like me, she's graduating this year, and I'm excited. I'm just so excited for her, my family, myself, my friends. I'm excited.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What do you do when you need to vent? And especially since you're a therapist. I think a lot of people actually wonder about this because you're like, they're human too. So
I have my own therapist. I see her every week when I can. If I'm on the go, it's kind of difficult, but I have my own therapist. My husband too.
yes, yes.
Who thinks he's a therapist? It's so funny. He just graduated. He went back to school and he got his bachelor's in psychology. And I joke because I joke all the time that he's another therapist.
He's just not a therapist. Just over here, just trying to be as healthy as we can.
No, he's amazing, and so I'll vent to him. I vent to my own therapist, my sister, my mom.
I always wonder that too because I was just like, I'm like, it has to weigh on you as a therapist to like hear everybody's things and like help them through it.
Yeah, it can be a lot, but I have a really good support system and they understand the work that I do. My sister works in medical field. My mom's a registered nurse, so they get it. My husband sees the day to day of what I'm doing in this journey, which is also what led him to go through part of the process as well. But yeah, I have a really good support system and great friends who just make me laugh. Most of my friends, they're either a lawyer or a comedian. So I'm laughing all the time. I'm going to comedy shows. I'm going to go see Sean Williams. I love to laugh.
You know what? The best medicine, right? The best medicine, laughter. Okay, a book, show, or song that has genuinely helped you with your own mental health.
Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. It was really pivotal in my work in understanding the connection of American chattel slavery and how we behave, how we parent, how we show up. She calls it the secret. She says there's a secret that we all experience that you don't learn until much later. And I remember reading her book. I was like 16 years old when I discovered it. And a lot of the things that she showed were connected directly back to enslavement my family did. And I was just like, wow, this explains so much. A lot of painful things. It doesn't erase the pain or the trauma that came with it, but having that understanding and that awareness shaped so much of how I see myself, how I see my family, how I understand the world. And when I'm watching people, I'm like, oh, I get it. I see that connection and what's happening.
What is something that looks like self-care but actually isn't?
Getting your hair and nails done, that is basic hygiene. I really abhor when people say that is self-care. Like you're stabbing, picking my cuticles. That is not fun. Um, Especially being a black woman having your hair done and the hot comb, and that is not fun. I consider it basic hygiene. That's not self-care. You want to look good, you want to be presentable. I got my nails done, but that was not fun for me. Not
Okay.
brings you joy. And maybe for some people, the process does bring you joy, but for me, it's painful. Um, and I don't like it. You know, they're shaving your nails and it gets hot and all the things. And I'm like, I don't like it. It doesn't feel good to me. The aftermath, you know, when
You're
you're a
like,
kid,
after, I'm like, I'm adorable. I love it.
but that is not self-care because it doesn't bring me joy. But I don't want to shame people who, if that is their sense of self-care, if you're getting true joy from it and you're by yourself, because I feel like self-care, you need to be by yourself. But there are those private spas where you're the only one and you're getting the queen treatment, you know. So if it's all about you by yourself and it's bringing you joy, then do it. But for me, that's not my self-care.
Like, absolutely freaking not. Okay, last question to anyone who just listened to this conversation and is trying to process or resonate with it, trying to understand where they are with this. What do you think they should be asking themselves?
Where let me make sure I understand that. To someone who's in the process of therapy, what they should be asking themselves, what am I feeling? How is my body feeling? How am I showing up? How am I navigating the pieces of life that present themselves in front of me? How am I walking? How am I sleeping? Am I showing up differently? Am I showing up the same? Am I more irritable? Really being introspective and asking yourself internally, how are you really feeling, truly feeling?
That's so important. I feel like that's the initial step to self-awareness that we definitely need more of.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us. Where can people find you, follow you, get the book, all the things?
Yes, get the book. You can find me on most social media platforms at Therapy with Ash, or LinkedIn or Facebook is just my name, Ashley McGirt. You can also go to my website, which is where you can also find the book, ashleymcgirt.com, or buy it anywhere books are sold. I support indie bookstores, Black, Brown-owned bookstores, Reparations Club out of LA. You're in LA. Octavia's Bookstore, that's another good one. Estelitas out of my hometown, Seattle. Those are some of the bookstores that I love.
Oh my gosh. All right, Slay Nation. Hopefully we gave you a little something to think about. As always, definitely like, comment, share. You doing that helps this episode go further, faster. Definitely follow us on the socials. We are So She Slays across all the socials. And you can go to SoSheSlays.com for even more of the So She Slays community. And if you're not already a part of our Patreon community, head on over and go to So She Slays Unfiltered AF and get all the extended content and all the fun stuff over in that community. Thank you so much again, Ashley. That was such a insightful and very powerful conversation. And I'm so excited for your book launch. We will be waiting. There it is. We will be waiting in anticipation. And Slay Nation, stay tuned because I'm sure we'll have details for that as well. Until next time, we'll catch you later. Thanks so much for listening.
Bye.